তাঙ্কুলে বিখন সার্থিত বিশ্বভুক্তয়ে সখৌদেবা সাতকাঙ্কুলে তব কথামৃতা তপ্ত জীবনা কবিভিরিতা কলমশাপহম তব কথামৃতা তপ্ত জীবনা কবিভিরিতা কলমশাপহম শ্রবণমঙ্গলা শ্রীমদাততা ভুবি গৃহ্ণন্তি যে ভূরিদা জনা শ্রবণমঙ্গলা শ্রীমদাততা ভুবি গৃহ্ণন্তি যে ভূরিদা জনা হরে কৃষ্ণ হরে কৃষ্ণ 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 হরে 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 রাম হরে রাম 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 হরে 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 কৃষ্ণ হরে কৃষ্ণ 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 হরে 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 রাম হরে রাম 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 হরে 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 কৃষ্ণ হরে কৃষ্ণ 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 হরে 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 রাম হরে রাম 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 হরে 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 কৃষ্ণ হরে কৃষ্ণ 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 হরে 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 রাম হরে রাম 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 হরে 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 কৃষ্ণ হরে কৃষ্ণ 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 হরে হরে
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Please accept my humble obeisances.
Please accept mine.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. So today we are very fortunate to have association of His Grace Shri Nandanandana Prabhuji, who is popularly known as Stephen Knapp. Prabhuji has written many books on Vedic philosophy, Vedic culture. So I will just like to give a brief introduction about Prabhuji. In 1976, Prabhu was initiated by Srila Prabhupada and given the name Sri Nandanandan, and was initiated into Brahminical several months later. Prabhuji is a visionary at an age where most of the people comfortably enjoying their retirement. Sri Nandanandan Prabhu is traveling extensively and preaching Krishna consciousness all over the world. And whether speaking to thousands of people at a rally or publishing a new book about Vedic culture or speaking at a temple program, Prabhuji is creating an interest in the heart of people for Krishna consciousness where none exists. Under his guidance, ISKCON in Michigan has grown from one center to three major centers, with more on the way. Being a disciple of Srila Prabhupada, he is serving as the board chairman of Detroit ISKCON for several years now and continues to inspire people all over the world through his work. Prabhupada is writing many books on Vedic literature. You would have visited Prabhuji's website, stephannab.com, where you will find so many books Prabhuji is writing and publishing for promoting this Vedic culture. So today we are very fortunate to have Prabhu's association, and we will hear about his early days in Krishna consciousness, meeting with Srila Prabhupada, and some of his interactions with His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj. So we welcome Prabhu by loudly chanting one time Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, 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 Hare Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, thanks so much for having me here. Glad to be here. Good evening to all devotees in Ujjain and those that are associates of Bhakti Charu Swami. And so to begin with, I guess I'll start with how I became involved in Krishna consciousness and started my spiritual life, which you could say in some ways started when I was about 7 years old. Because I remember specifically one morning when I was in my bed. It was a Saturday morning. My parents were not getting up because it was Saturday. Everybody had a day off. And I was thinking to myself, how did I get here? You know, how did I get here in this body, in this place, in this neighborhood? And I was trying to figure it out. There must be some reason, there must be some cause. And I was never very fond of being in a material body anyway. I couldn't figure out, even at that age, to show how weird I was, you might say. I was thinking to myself, why is it you got to feed the body? Then, you know, you got to give it rest. Then you got to take it to the bathroom and all that nasty business. And the thing of it was so, the body is so vulnerable. If you can't breathe for 3 minutes, then you die. It's like, I couldn't figure out why things were the way they were. But I figured one thing, there's got to be a better place. And if at all possible, I got to get out of here. And so anyway, so that kind of stuck with me for a while, but then, you know, you get involved in other things, other life and stuff. So then in my teenage years, I became a musician, and I was playing a lot of, you know, rock and roll, blues music, things like that. But then the people I was hanging out with, we would also sit down and try to figure out, okay, we're doing all this stuff, but where do we fit in? Where do we actually fit into this world? So I had a friend of mine. And so anyway, this friend of mine, we were kind of interested in this stuff together. So I was reading like, you know, the Bible from cover to cover. I was reading about Judaism, Eastern mysticism, Tarot, I Ching, you know, you name it. I was reading about it to try to figure out and get some hints as to what the whole purpose of life was. And then my friend went to Toronto. Now, remember, I was living in a small town in Michigan on the other side of the, in the south western corner of the state. There was no temples, there was no nothing like that. And the town was only a town of 5,000 people. So there wasn't even that many people in the town, what to speak of finding somebody that was interested in spirituality. So my friend went to Toronto in Canada, and he met the devotees on the street there. And so when he came back, he brought a pamphlet. And this pamphlet had a selection of books, you know, like teachings of Lord Chaitanya. And this was back in about 1970. And so the BBT, which was in Boston at the time, only had a few selection of books, like Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, Nectar of Devotion, Easy Journey to Other Planets, which really sounded fascinating. And then they had this Bhagavad Gita. And my friend said, yeah, that's kind of like the Indian Bible, the Bhagavad Gita. And I said, well, okay, that's what I want, because that's what I was searching. I was searching for different cultures and their concepts of God, the soul, and everything like that. Because even after reading the Bible from cover to cover, I had a lot of questions that still weren't being answered. So I was still looking around. So then when I finally got the Bhagavad Gita, which was the little blue Bhagavad Gita that Prabhupada had written and first came out with, I read that, and it had so many answers like, what is the soul, who and what is God, how we got here, and where we're going or where we should be going. And so I realized I got to get more of this. This is the kind of information I'm looking for. So then I ordered more books, and like I mentioned, Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, Nectar of Devotion, and books like that. And then I ordered the Krishna book. The Krishna book hadn't been out very long. It only came out in, I think it was 1971. So in the middle of 1971, I got the Krishna book in the mail. And I remember getting this big hardbound Krishna book with all these pictures in it. And I was just so happy. I don't even know why I was so happy about it, but it was like Krishna coming back into my life. And so I really enjoyed reading that. I just, and then went on to read whatever I could get, whether it was the Upanishads, whether the Manusamhita. I remember going into these occult bookstores and picking up whatever I could get. And then finally, in 1972, my friends decided, we got to get out of this town. We got to go someplace else where there's more opportunity, more things to do. So they convinced me to go along with them. Because I was still interested in music, and nothing was happening there at the time. So we went to when was it? We went to Phoenix, Arizona, clear across the country, and we stayed there for a little while, and that didn't work out so well. So they had some friends up in Denver, Colorado. So we went and stayed with some friends, found a place, our own house, and then while walking the streets in Denver, I came across a devotee. And so, it was just Krishna's arrangement. I mean, the whole thing was Krishna's arrangement, because like I said, I was coming from a small town in Buchanan, in Michigan, which has only had a population of 5,000. So there really wasn't much we could get out of it. But Krishna always finds a way. If you're meant to understand Krishna, somehow he'll find a way that you can have access to knowledge about him. So that's what happened. So then when I met the devotee on the street, he gave me a card, said, yes, please come to the temple at such and such a time. We're going to have a festival pretty soon. And the festival is Gaur Purnim. So I remember the first time I went to the temple, and it's still in the same place it is now, the little church on Cherry Street on the eastern side of Denver, Colorado. And so I went there and, got to learn to take off your shoes and things like that. And so the program was really nice. And they were renovating the temple. So the big temple room they have now, that wasn't complete. And they had the deities in a back room. So anyway, they had the program in the main room. And so there was a lecture, and then there was a feast, which I really liked that because I had just become vegetarian like several months before. So that was really interesting and very tasty. And then one devotee said, well, we're going to have a special ritual. Would you like to stay and attend that? I said, sure, why not? So, and it was about 7 o'clock. So we went into this back room, and there were the deities. They had a picture of the Panchatattva on one side, and they had a big Jagannath, big Balaram, and a little small Subhadra in the middle on the other side. So they started doing the Arti ceremony and singing the bhajans and everything. And I remember, coming from a Christian background, I was thinking, isn't this idol worship? Maybe I should be cautious about this. But then I was feeling so good, I thought, I don't care, and so I really got into it. And so that was my first experience. And I remember coming out of the church, out of the temple, and it was dark. and the stars were out and everything. And after that initial visit to the temple, the universe, the world just looked completely different. I just had a completely different view of everything. And on the way back to going to where we lived, the house where we were staying at, George Harrison's song, My Sweet Lord, comes on the radio. And it was just synchronicity that it just, made me feel even more enlivened to be a part of this process. So I started going to the temple every week. And so gradually, I learned more about it and just kept reading the books. Of course, I was very dedicated to my music at the time. But gradually, after a few more years of going to the temple and reading the books and all that, finally I decided, okay, maybe it's time to join the ashram and take this seriously. And because I remember when I was in Boston in '73, I was still a musician, jamming with other musicians and stuff like that. And I started chanting. Which means I started chanting 2 rounds a day, then 4 rounds a day, and splitting that time with reading. So I was reading about an hour a day, chanting about an hour a day. And I had this inner strength that came through me at the time. And I was still smoking cigarettes on the weekends and stuff. And I thought, what am I going to do with this inner strength that I have? And I thought to myself, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to quit smoking. And I did. Because of the higher taste from chanting Hare Krishna, I started giving up whatever bad habits I had. And then gradually I came to the point where, okay, time to join the ashram. So in 1975, I was attached, sentimentally at least, to the Denver temple. So I joined the Denver temple. And just before that, Prabhupada came to the Denver temple. But I had seen Prabhupada a few times before that. In fact, when I was first in Denver, I decided to leave Denver and go to California and stuff. And so when I went to California, I met some friends of mine that were there in Los Angeles. And because I knew them from the Denver temple, they had gone to Los Angeles. So then when I went to Los Angeles, they said, guess what, Steve? Srila Prabhupada's in San Diego. Let's go see him. I was, sure, that sounds great. So the next morning we got up early, drove to San Diego and to this little house, and Prabhupada was giving class. By the time we got to the temple, Prabhupada was giving class. And it was up in an upstairs room where as I climbed the stairs, the whole atmosphere began to change. It started getting the only thing I can say is it started getting more electric, more intense, more, enlivening. And so I got into the temple room and came in around the corner and was watching Srila Prabhupada give class. And I can't remember anything he said, but it was very enlivening because I had been through before, when I left Denver to go to California, a number of bad incidences had happened. I got evicted from my house, lost my girlfriend, all these different things that happened. Some people broke into my van, stole my guitars. I was like devastated. And then when I got into the room with Srila Prabhupada, it was like all of that stuff didn't matter anymore. It was like just part of life that happened, and everything was completely different. Once I was in the association of Prabhupada like that, everything was completely different. So anyway, Prabhupada was staying in San Diego for 3 or 4 days. And so then I learned that what he does is he goes on a morning walk and then comes back to the temple and gives class. So what I did was I went, to the temple early in the morning. And then when Prabhupada was going on his morning walk, I went into the temple room and sat down right next to the Vyasasana. So when Prabhupada came in, I was right next to him. And I had my camera at the time, and I took some pictures without flash, so it wouldn't disturb Prabhupada. And those pictures, of all those pictures in San Diego, Los Angeles, then later in San Francisco, Rath Yatra, because I followed Prabhupada up. I followed him from San Diego to Los Angeles, and then to San Francisco in time for the Rath Yatra. And all those pictures you can see and many more on my website at www.stephen, that's STEPHEN hyphen nap, KNAPP.com, stephen-nap.com. You can see all those pictures on that website. And so then in Los Angeles, I remember he was giving class and I was near the Vyasa-san. But then after class, Prabhupada got up and he came around and suddenly he was standing right next to me. And so he paid his obeisances to leave. So I paid my obeisances right next to him. And I just kind of moved myself over until my shoulder touched his shoulder. And, you know, being as fallen as I was, I can honestly say that when I touched his shoulder, I could feel a force come through from him, through me, invigorating me in that sense. And it was quite an experience. And then we both got up and he went his way. And so I stayed in Los Angeles for, you know, another 3 or 4 days. And then when we went up to San Francisco, and that's when I went to the first San Francisco Rath Yatra, which was quite an experience there too, because that's where the original Rath Yatras began. And so I saw Prabhupada a few different places. Then I saw him again a year or so later in Chicago for the Rath Yatra there. I saw him in, when was it? That same year, 1972 in New Vrindavan. There was a big festival in New Vrindavan. So I went and saw Prabhupada there, and which was really ecstatic because I got some pictures of him there as well. And it's interesting, some pictures of me also near Prabhupada, or even while I was taking pictures of Prabhupada. And then just before I joined the ashram in 75, Prabhupada came and visited Denver. So then I went to Denver, and you know, when I visited these temples, I was usually just staying in my van. And so then I was able to stay in Denver. And when Prabhupada stayed for about 5 days, you know, giving class every day, people doing Harinam, and he would come and watch us or drive by while we were doing Harinam and things like that. And so that was an ecstatic time. And that's when I decided, okay, time to join the ashram. So then I came back to Michigan, cleared up and finished all my business, got everything settled, and then went back to Denver and joined the ashram. And once I joined the ashram, I never saw Prabhupada again. So being a good devotee, doing service in the temple and everything, you know, other people were going to India and this and that. And I helped manage the temple, actually. I became the temple treasurer. And so that, you know, which is a responsibility that doesn't go away very easily, or you can't find a substitute for it very well. So I never was able to see Prabhupada again after that. So I was really glad that I had the time and the opportunity to see Prabhupada the way I did and when I did. Because the thing of it was, though, I was mostly used to associating with Prabhupada through his books and through his tapes, his lecture tapes. So when the unfortunate time came when Prabhupada left, everybody was completely devastated. I remember that very clearly. But for those of us that were used to associating with Prabhupada through his books and his tapes, we just kept doing that. We kept getting his association through his books and tapes. So in some ways, we were not affected by it as much as those who depended so much on his physical association. It was a different kind of circumstances for us. And so we were able to keep going with the mission, even while other people were having difficulties. Of course, we were all having difficulties. There's no doubt about that. But, you know, we were able to keep going with it. So that's basically how I got started in my Krishna consciousness, how I came across with and saw Srila Prabhupada several times on several different places, and how it got started. So then I moved from Denver. Then I went to Chicago. From Chicago, I went to, there's one of my pictures there. Those are the pictures from San Diego. When I was sitting next to Srila Prabhupada, next to his Vyasa-san. So you can see it. Those are unpublished pictures, except for those that are on my website. Those are unpublished pictures. I had sent them to the archives on a CD, but I don't think they ever did anything with them. So these are some of the pictures that I had taken of Srila Prabhupada years ago, which brings back a lot of memories, actually, of how, those times were and how things had happened. And so anyway, then I went from Chicago, I went to Detroit. I was in Detroit 1980, 81. Then I went to Dallas to help with some of the construction down there. Then from Dallas, I went to New Vrindavan to help with some of the stained glass and some of the construction there. And then I decided to go back to, I didn't like the way things were developing in New Vrindavan so much. So I thought, okay, I better go back to Detroit. So I went back to Detroit in 84, and I've been in Detroit ever since then. And that was all, let me see, about 1985, 86 is the time when I decided that I would like to try writing. And the thing of it was, I was never very good at book distribution. I wanted to distribute the knowledge. I wanted to preach, but I was too shy. I couldn't stand going door to door. I didn't like doing Sankirtan on the streets, but I wanted to come up with some way of distributing this knowledge. So I came up with the idea of writing a correspondence course. And I put a book together. It was a few hundred pages long, and it was called The Secret Teachings of the Vedas, especially because, Westerners, it was for a Western audience. But for Westerners especially, they like something secret, So, okay, here's the secret teachings of the Vedas. And this is straightforward preaching Krishna consciousness. And it had all about, who and what I am, what is the soul, how we go through the material life, our life in the material world, who or what is God, what is karma, reincarnation, all these different aspects. So I put like all this information in a simplified form into one book. And so and back then there were not so many different avenues for advertising. There was only like a certain number of magazines and places you could advertise. So you could reach a lot of people much more easily than you can today. So I did that, and I started getting orders for the correspondence course, but most of the people simply just wanted the book. You could get the book or the course, and the course had some tapes, some transcriptions of the tapes, some extra information, and then you have a test you take, and then after the test you get a certificate. But most people just wanted the book. So then that kind of led me into thinking that, okay, book preaching is the way I should go. I should repackage this information and put it into a book that's easy to understand. Because especially dealing with Westerners, of course, it became the same way when dealing with Indians, when so many Indians started taking interest in what I had to offer. The whole point of it is to make something and present something in a way that people can easily relate to it and can identify with it, so they can easily understand it. If they can't understand it, they'll never remember it. If they can't remember it, they'll never apply it to their lives. If they can't apply it to their lives, then basically we are missing our mark. We have to present it in a way that people can easily assimilate it and apply it to their existence, so they can change and develop themselves. So that was my whole modus operandi from the start, is how to present something complex. And of course, when preaching for Westerners, you don't want to use too many big words. You don't want to use too much Sanskrit. So I started with that book, The Secret Teachings of the Vedas. And then it went on from there to other books like the Vedic Prophecies, How the Universe Was Created, and then up to and including things like Proof of Vedic Culture's Global Existence, Advancements of Ancient India's Vedic Culture, Mysteries of the Ancient Vedic Empire, to one of my latest books was The Power of the Bhagavad Gita, The Power of the Ramayana, or even my book, Bhakti Yoga, The Easy Path of Devotional Yoga. So those books had all come out, and I started reaching a lot of people that way. And in the year 2000, well, actually before that, what happened was I got a letter from a company called Baker and Taylor. They're a sophisticated and well-known book distributing company. And when that happened, I realized, and that was late 80s. And when that happened, I realized I got to take this more seriously. Now I'm getting, orders from book distributing companies. And then later, a few years after that, I got another call on the phone from somebody said, "You still offer your book, The Secret Teachings of the Vedas?" "Yeah, sure. What's the wholesale price?" "Well, $6.97, so, and I was selling it for $15 or something like that. And it turned out to be a company called Amazon. I'm thinking to myself, Amazon? What is Amazon? Well, I don't care. If they want to buy the book, I'll sell them the book. And then later on, they kept ordering copies of it. So that was my first exposure to Amazon. I think that must have been when they hardly had any big facilities going on or anything. And all of my books have since then been, distributed and published through Amazon, which is something I've tried to gear my books towards. But some books specifically are for an Indian audience, like Crimes Against India. That's another book that's specifically for primarily an Indian audience, which is caught on. And so I remember when I came out with Proof of Vedic Culture's Global Existence, a friend of mine, a sannyasi, ISKCON sannyasi friend of mine, was saying, this book is going to put you on the map. More and more people are going to want to know about this. And sure enough, within 6 months, they were having what was called a big thinkers meet, which was a meeting of the most important journalists and writers on Hinduism and Vedic culture in India. And they ordered a case of that book, Proof of Vedic Culture's Global Existence, to hand out to the most important people. And that was like, almost 40 copies of the book that went to India for that meeting. And it was shortly after that they invited me to come and participate in some of the programs they were having. Well, sure, why not? They paid my way, they gave me a ticket. And ever since then, I've been going to India almost once a year because somebody is paying my way, getting my ticket, and putting me on a lecture tour or something like that. But that was the first lecture tour I went on. That was in about the year 2000. And I was with Professor Subhash Kak. We actually shared the tour together. And he would talk from a scientific point of view, and I would talk basically from the heart, how I appreciated the Vedic tradition and what India has to offer. And people were very, very interested in that perception, that what I had to say about it. And that started, I'd never even, been in front of an Indian audience like that before, where, you go to an auditorium and there's anywhere from 50 to 200 people ready to listen to you. But then I learned how to speak in front of that audience in a very short time, so that by the time we got to Vijayawada, I was speaking strongly and convincingly that after that lecture, and you can always tell what effect you had by the amount of people that came and wanted to talk to you afterwards. This one person came up and he says, "You know something? When you were talking, I felt you were the return of Vivekananda." And of course, we're not trying to be Vivekananda, but you can understand what a great compliment that is, because they hold him in high regard. So when I was speaking like that, he felt very enlivened. And so he mentioned it that way. So these were all different experiences that I've had that have motivated me to not only preach, to continue preaching for a Western audience, but also for the Indian audience. And so there's other experiences I've had where, for example, you probably heard of the organization called Swajaya, which is a huge organization throughout the world, mostly from Gujarat, but they were having a big event at Madison Square Garden. This was, must have been 12 years ago or so. And, as a musician, you always think that someday you'll be in a group and you'll play Madison Square Garden. Well, that never happened. But in some ways, Krishna kind of gave me a taste of what that might have been like, because they invited me to come to this event. They paid my way. I go to New York. They pick me up, and they have like 25,000 people in Madison Square Garden to celebrate this big event with the leader of the group called Dadaji. And when I was in the dressing rooms, there's all these pictures of these, famous rock and roll stars, musicians that had played Madison Square Garden. So they wanted me to come out, and they offered me a seat on the stage. And so all these events are going on at the garden. People are, dancing, and this and that is going on. And the whole audience is waiting for different people to speak. And then they said that you're going to speak. We want you to say a few words too. Well, they didn't tell me that to begin with. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, what am I going to say in front of 25,000 people? It's like, so I started thinking, well, they only wanted me to speak for like maybe 10 minutes. So I thought, okay, I could say this, and then I could say that, and then I could say this, that should take up 10 minutes. So then they call me up, and I'm standing, first time I've been in front of 25,000 people like this at Madison Square Garden, no less. And so I start speaking, and all of a sudden everybody starts applauding. And when all these people start applauding, it's not like you can go on speaking and be heard. So then it was the first time I actually had to wait for the audience to die down so I could continue speaking. And that happened like 4 times throughout the event. And so once again, it really made me understand how to present myself in front of an Indian audience. Of course, after that, speaking in front of an engagement like that, I felt like I could practically do anything. But I've also done a number of lecture tours through the Northeast region of India, Assam, Manipur, Nagaland, places like that, places where people don't often get to go, and where I was also able to go up there and do lectures to encourage people to follow their culture, follow the Vedic tradition, and not be so susceptible to being converted by the different organizations or religions that were up in that region. One nice thing that happened was that maybe about 4 or 5 years ago, I got a call from Bhakti Charu Swami. Out of nowhere, Bhakti Charu Swami just gives me a call. And I'm on the phone. I said, "This is Bhakti Charu Swami. Please accept my humble obeisance." And I'm going like, "Bhakti Charu Swami, thanks so much for calling me. What can I do? What do I do? What did I deserve to deserve this call?" And he says, "Well, I just want to let you know that I'm a fan. I'm a fan of your books," which really affected me a lot, because quite honestly, in ISKCON, sometimes you're not sure whether you're really doing what's a contribution to society or not. You're not sure if the devotees are appreciating what you do. I mean, other people are obviously appreciating me, but here's one of the, top level GBC gurus giving me a call, just telling me that they appreciate what I do. And so I really appreciated what he had to do. I mean, what he did to call me up like that. And he said, "Well, sometime maybe we can get together and spend some time to each other." And I says, "That'd be great." Of course, you never know whether that's going to happen or not. So then at the last Kumbh Mela in Ujjain, I think it was in 2016, or maybe before that, 2015, I can't remember, 2015 or 16. Anyway, I was invited to go to this big conference, and the government of Madhya Pradesh was paying my ticket to attend this big conference. Modi was going to be there. He was going to be a speaker. And, so it was coinciding at the same time with the Kumbh Mela in Ujjain. So I contacted Bhakti Charu, and I was wondering if he was going to be in town. Sure enough, he was going to be there. He was going to be in Ujjain during the Kumbh Mela. So I asked him, "Well, I'm thinking of going there. Do you think I should get a reservation to stay at the camp, the Kumbh Mela camp?" He says, "No, I think you should just stay in one of our guest rooms." I thought, okay, that's nice. And so he arranged it. I stayed in one of the guest rooms. And when I got to the airport in Indore, some devotees were there to pick me up. And so he really arranged things nicely. I got to the temple, got a guest room, stayed there. And then I was actually able to see him we spent some time together. We had lunch together a few times. We had breakfast together a few times. And we were talking at that time about the need for, farm projects, agricultural projects to try to, preserve the Vedic tradition, but also follow Prabhupada's instructions, which was to become more self-sufficient, because it seems to be that some devotees in ISKCON take it seriously, but there's not that many devotees that take it seriously. And Prabhupada always said, there'll be a time when millions of people will come to our farms. People will come to our farms by the millions because things will become so desperate. But the point of it is we have to have farms. If we don't have farms, how's that going to happen? And in some ways, people are kind of thinking, like devotees are thinking, well, is it true that we need farms? Or where's the proof? Well, the problem is by the time you get proof that, yeah, we need farms, well, then it's too late. So we were talking like that. And so then anyway, after staying at the ISKCON guest house for a few days, then I was transferred to a hotel where I was staying to attend the conference, this big conference that was going on. And, a lot of big names were there. So I was very happy to attend that conference. But then later, we all know that Bhakti Charu Swami started his project in Dayland, Florida. And I had mentioned that to him after he had started it. We had a little discussion with him that I wanted to come down and be a part, just spend some time down there with him. And so I was still planning on doing that. And so it's really upsetting to me that he left us before I was able to do that. I really wanted to come down and see what he had to offer, what he was doing, and just to be a part of that for a while and see what was happening. Because once again, I think it's an important project for ISKCON. We need to have the farms. We need to become self-sufficient. We need to be able to take care of ourselves. The primary thing is, not only do we need book distribution, but we need to show people how to take care of ourselves, how to move forward. And it's not enough sometimes simply to give somebody books, but we have to show the example of how it's done. So I really appreciated his project, and I really hope the devotees and disciples of Bhakti Charu Swami can keep that going, keep his vision alive, keep pushing forward. And I think he'd be really happy with that. And again, I'm glad to see everything that he was able to do. I'm glad to have received the encouragement from him to keep my preaching going through books and that, because now I have almost 50 books that I've published. And it's interesting because in this lockdown that we've had, my book sales have actually increased. And some books, like my book, Bhakti Yoga, The Easy Path of Devotional Yoga, which is a 450-page book. It's not a small book. That was downloaded like 700 times just in the month of May. And then in April, my book, The Power of the Maha Mantra, was downloaded also 700 times, where people were a part of this Amazon program. They become members and they can download books for a fraction of the cost. And so people were taking advantage of that. And so it's interesting to show that even during this lockdown, people are thinking, people are asking questions, and they want to have the answers. And so they're looking for this information, what Krishna consciousness has to offer. And so if we can continue to move forward in this way, it'll be very beneficial to society. Of course, the lockdown has affected temple attendance and temple operations. So I don't know when that's going to get back to normal, but there's certain ways that we can get around that, as we're doing now through this Zoom conference. And sometimes through this avenue, we're getting association that normally never would have get. I wouldn't be able to come to Ujjain or even come to India at all very easily right now. But through this Zoom conference, there's so much association, so many stories we can hear, and ways we can benefit or encourage each other. So anyway, I know I was supposed to give a talk for about 45 minutes. We're at about a 40-minute mark right now. So I don't mean to dominate the whole time period. So I don't know if there's any questions anybody has, if they want to ask now, or we can give them a chance to see if anybody's interested in asking any questions.
Yeah, Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. There are few questions. One question is by Dr. Sachin Mittal. He's saying, Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam. With your extensive knowledge, it would be nice to have you still go to D-Land and offer some advice on farming as Maharaj wanted to initiate. So I think this is just a comment.
That's a good question. Well, Bhakti Charu Swami was, if I understood the question right, Bhakti Charu Swami was always very insightful. But I'll tell you one thing, he also had the gumption to take up certain projects on his own. And he may have asked other people about it as well. Naturally, everybody does. In fact, I often say that I've never had an original idea since I've been a devotee, because I always depend on inspiration, ideas that come to me from the deities. And so, but Bhakti Charu Swami was very much the same way, where he would see the need for something, and rather than waiting for someone else to do it, sometimes he would take it up himself. And in some ways, we need to follow in his footsteps, where if we see the need for something to be done, we figure out a way to take care of that issue, get around the problems, and move forward so that we can continue to present Krishna consciousness in whatever practical way we can. And in that way, follow in his footsteps to carry on his mission, carry on his vision, actually. And so that's one thing that we can do is, I always do it this way. Either I depend on the telepathic messages from the deities themselves, or I go to the deities with a request that I have an idea. What do you think about it? Because I have a very strong relationship with the deities. They can come alive at any time they want, and they can tell you what to do. But also praying to your guru can do the same thing. Praying to Bhakti Charu Swami, my dear guru, please let me know somehow or another, give me an affirmation about what I should do, or I have this idea, tell me what you think about it, let me know somehow or another. And sometimes the guru teaches and preaches through other people. He talks to you through other people. Sometimes Krishna does the same thing. He teaches or preaches or tells you things through other people. You have to be aware enough and advanced enough to know when it is coming from an authority like the deities or from your guru, and not just your mind. So you have to be very careful about that. But if you're advanced enough, then, if it's a time for a particular activity to take place, then there's no way it will not be successful to some degree or other. I mean, I can also say that when I first started talking about this, establishing a preaching center in the suburbs, many people looked at me like I was sacrilegious or something. How can you even say such a thing? But I could tell there was a need for it. The deities agreed with that. And now we have a temple, we have 2 temples in the suburbs that are doing very nicely. So it's just a matter of, never giving up. That's one thing. Never give up, never give up, never give up. When there's an idea, or even in your own progress, keep moving forward under any threats or obstacles. And pretty soon Krishna will simply begin opening doors of opportunity that you never even knew were there. And so that you can move forward with your preaching efforts and to continue developing in your Krishna consciousness and helping others develop in their Krishna consciousness. I mean, that's really why we're here. So I hope that answers the question to some degree.
Yes, Prabhuji. There is one more question. Can you please share some moments with Srila Prabhupada that kept you inspired and continue to serve him even after so many years he departed?
Well, one thing that happened was when I was a treasurer in the Denver temple, and I'll admit, Prabhupada's books is what made me a devotee. Prabhupada's books is what's going to keep me a devotee. And when I was there, the temple president at the time saw that I was reading at every spare moment I had. He says, you know, this reading business is mostly for sannyasis and temple presidents. Everyone else is supposed to serve. Meanwhile, as temple treasurer, I was getting quotes in the mail from Prabhupada, where Prabhupada specifically was saying that I wrote my books for my disciples and also grand disciples, and I expect my disciples to read my books. Otherwise, they will simply again become hippies. So that was very profound. And there was other quotes like that, you know, where Prabhupada expected us to read his books, not just, you know, sell his books, but you have to read it and understand it. And so that's, and then also he also would, there'd be descriptions of how we should write. We should write according to our own realization and express our thoughts, and so that other people can take advantage of it. So I took those instructions very seriously. So whether Prabhupada was here or after he had left, those instructions stayed with me forever. And that's what actually motivated me to start writing books and to continue, because to write books, you got to read, you got to gain all these references, this knowledge, and put it in order. So I was always in contact with Srila Prabhupada's books. And those itself, those two instructions, read his books, write according to your realizations, were two instructions that have kept me motivated in the service that I do, besides the management that I've been in. I've been a temple manager ever since I was a bhakta. But those are the things that have kept me going regardless of what situations there were, what obstacles there were, whether I felt enlivened or maybe not so enlivened. I always got more enlivened after reading Prabhupada's books. So by carrying out those two instructions have seen me through all kinds of challenges, difficulties, or whatever. And I advise everybody, you know, just like I write books, but I write books trying to bring people to Krishna consciousness. Once you're in Krishna consciousness, everyone should try to read all of Prabhupada's books, especially Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, Nectar of Devotion. Those are some of the main books. Everybody should read those books once you become a devotee. So don't neglect that. And that will give you the understanding to move forward. That, and just by associating with Prabhupada, the vibrational level, the spiritual vibration that's in those books, that itself will bring you to a higher platform of understanding and perception. So I always advise everybody to do that. So I hope that also answers the question to some degree, but that's what's been my backup all these years, just taking association from Srila Prabhupada through his books.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. There is one question by devotee. Is asking, what motivated to write so many books? I think you answered this question.
Well, that was part of it right there, just the instructions from Srila Prabhupada. But one thing I always felt was I never felt I was a very good speaker. I never felt I was somebody who could give a good class. I mean, at this point, I've given hundreds of lectures to so many different kinds of audiences. But, you know, I still don't feel comfortable giving a class. I don't feel comfortable being in front of people, even though, like I said, you know, I've given a talk in front of 25,000 people at Madison Square Garden. You can't beat that very easily. But the point of it is, I would simply rather be a background person, somebody in the background, you know, helping things out, you know, like that. And I thought, okay, how do I get around not feeling comfortable being in front of people? How do I get around not being able to do Sankirtan very well or door-to-door preaching very well? Okay, well, I'll package this knowledge into what I feel is an attractive format where people can get a lot of information very quickly without having to read 20 volumes of books. And so that's when I came out with the Secret Teachings of the Vedas. And that's one of the reasons, some of the reasons why I thought, you know, let me try to write instead of being, you know, like a speaker in front of people all the time. And oddly enough, that book was taken up by a publishing company in India, Jaco. They published that book, The Secret Teachings of the Vedas. And just several months ago, people were sending me pictures that that book was in the bookstores and airports across India. So, which is to me somewhat successful in the sense that I've finally been able to get my books out there in an attractive package where it would sit on the table in a bookstore, in the airport, on the bestseller counter, where people would be most likely to see it and hopefully buy it and take advantage of it. Because that book, like I said, it's not based on motivational preaching. It's not, or speaking. It's not based on giving jokes or anything like that, or simple moralistic principles. It's straightforward Krishna consciousness, but done in a way where I would hope, and obviously it has become somewhat successful in the sense that it would attract people to buy the book automatically rather than someone trying to sell them the book, if you know what I mean. So that was my goal. That was my intention from the start. And so fortunately, I have become somewhat successful in that avenue of preaching. And now, under this lockdown, unfortunately, the bookstores and the airports might not be selling so many books, but the work through the internet has increased exponentially through all this. And my books are already there. You can get them through Kindle or paperback through Amazon at all the different Amazon outlets, or even more areas besides that. So somehow or another, Krishna also just kind of led me into that to do this. And so I can only thank Srila Prabhupada, Lord Krishna, and devotees like Bhakti Charu Swami for giving me the encouragement to continue working in this way, for that which I am extremely grateful. So at least I've been able, I can feel like I've at least been able to do something.
Thank you, Prabhuji. There is one question by Sundar Damodar from Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, the Lord Pranam. In spite of so many proofs of significance and prediction in the Vedas, why are the common master scientists not able to accept and appreciate the Vedas?
Well, I think in some ways, Prabhupada was, he was preaching against the scientists, because the scientists, they have their own group of people, they have their own lingo, they have their own way of looking at things. So all you can do is to give them whatever knowledge they might be willing to accept. People like Sariputta or Michael Cremo and others are much more adept at dealing with the scientific circles of people better than some devotees. But the point of it is, it's like anybody else. I mean, some people will accept what you have to offer, some people won't. Some people, no matter how logical it may be, they're still looking for what they say, a natural process of creation, or a natural explanation, which simply means a godless explanation, a godless process of creation. They don't want to admit that there's a God. As long as they have that idea that there's no God, it's going to be very difficult to convince them of many of the things that are found within the Vedic literature or the Srimad Bhagavatam and like that. So basically, it's kind of like they say, some will, some won't. So what? Move on to the next. So you keep, and that's why I've always based my books on reaching the lay people. The lay people are often more receptive to this knowledge than the academics or the scientists. And especially in America, as long as you give something that they can relate to in a logical way, they'll listen to it. And if, like I said, if they can understand it, they'll then be able to remember it. If they can remember it, they'll apply it to their lives, whatever aspect they can. So in this way, don't get too preoccupied in trying to convince people who are not going to be convinced anyway. Try to reach those people that are most likely to be receptive to the message you have to offer. And that way you'll not waste your time, you'll not waste their time, and you're more apt to make more devotees that way. And we're interested, that's what our main interest is, to make devotees, give this knowledge to those people who are receptive, And like I say, some will, some won't. So what? Move on to the next person, and just keep moving forward.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji. There is another question. I am reading those books by Srila Prabhupada, Srimad Bhagavatam, Nectar Instruction, Nectar Devotion, Krishna book. But how can we attain perfection if we want to explain someone and how to remember? How can I improve my devotional service and chanting?
Well, by continuing with the process. One thing, sometimes people think that, well, if I was more pure, I'd be more effective. Well, you're absolutely right. But the purity is actually based on how well you chant your rounds, how well you do your sadhana. Because remember, in the beginning stages, we need to purify ourselves. As we begin to purify ourselves, the whole mantra that I use is, the more spiritual you become, the more you can perceive that which is spiritual. The more you can perceive that which is spiritual, that means the more spiritualized your consciousness is becoming. And the more spiritualized your consciousness is becoming, the more effective you will become as well. And the more you'll have the favor of your guru, the parampara, the deities, Lord Krishna himself. And sometimes all we can do is present this information to certain people, and the rest is up to Krishna. We can't feel that we are the cause of everything. Krishna is the cause, and our guru is the cause. If we simply act on the basis of trying to please our guru and Krishna, then, like I say, doors of opportunity will open up that you didn't even know were there. But the main thing is to continue becoming purified by association with that which is pure, which is the holy names, the chanting of Hare Krishna, the association of Prabhupada's books, and naturally, it purifies our consciousness. I mean, the whole process of Bhakti Yoga is simply this, is that, if you want to spiritualize your consciousness, then first you spiritualize your activities. The more your activities become spiritualized and purified, then the more your mind becomes purified. When the mind becomes purified, the desires become purified. When the desires become purified, that is a sign that your consciousness is becoming purified. So this is the whole process of Bhakti Yoga. Then, of course, as you become purified, you'll get a stronger taste, ruchi. You'll become more stable and determined, nishta. You'll become more fixed. And then gradually you'll graduate from a Vaidhi Bhakti to a Bhava Bhakti. And so in this case, Krishna will give you the means by which you will be able to become most effective in that way. So basically, like I've said, never give up. Keep undergoing the process of purification, and your ideas will also become more purified, and you'll be able to understand how to more effectively reach as many people as possible through whatever audience you're trying to reach. So I hope that helps answer your question to a degree.
Yeah, thank you, Prabhuji.
I mean, I'm basically speaking from experience. When I talk like this, I'm basically speaking from experience because there's many problems that I've come up with that for a while I didn't know how to take care of. I didn't know how to handle it. But gradually you begin to see how to get around these different problems. So that's Krishna's mercy.
Thank you, Prabhuji. There is one question. Sometimes our faith gets disturbed and we forget many of the realizations we had. Then I generally again go into the basics and understand it, which helps me again. Roger, can you please share some of the realizations or any miracle in Krishna consciousness?
Well, miracles are one thing that you should always expect in Krishna consciousness. You don't bank on them, but you can always expect them. And there's definitely been miracles in my life. The whole process of writing, publishing, it's been quite interesting to see how Krishna has arranged my life in such a way that I've been able to do these particular things, because I'm not a person that stands out. I'm not a prominent person in ISKCON. Like I said, I like being a background person. But even so, when I first started writing, sometimes people would say, "Oh, why is Sri Nandanandana writing books? He's no pure devotee." But Prabhupada used to say, when the guru says, "This is a pencil," and then you take it and say, "This is a pencil," then that's pure preaching. When you say Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, when the guru says that, and you say Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that's pure preaching. That's all it takes. So in many ways, this whole process of going to India so many times, because I remember one time I I don't pray to Krishna for material things. So what I did was I prayed to Lakshmi. I prayed to Lakshmi, my dear goddess Lakshmi, I'd already been to India about 6 times, and I wanted to keep going, but I'd never had that much money. So I prayed to Lakshmi, kindly give me the money so I can continue to go to India. Well, she never really gave me the money to go to India, but all after that, after the year like 2000, every time I went to India, someone else was always paying for it, which is just as good. So to me, that's like a miracle. That's like a miracle that happened because I was able to utilize the blessings from Lakshmi to carry out my mission to spread Krishna consciousness. And that's how I look at it. I will accept assistance from wherever I get it in order to continue my mission of preaching, writing, spreading Krishna consciousness. This is like one time this was one thing that happened that was very personal, but my apartment was broken into. And they stole my computer, they stole money, they stole a bunch of other things. And I was thinking to myself, I need these things so I can write. Maybe Krishna doesn't want me to do this. Maybe Krishna just doesn't want me to write anymore. Maybe I should give this up. I don't know what else I'm supposed to do, but and this was 2001 or 2 or something like that. So I'd already had some books that were coming out, becoming rather successful. And all of a sudden there was this great barrier. And so I just thought, okay, maybe Krishna doesn't want me to do this anymore. And then I was invited to a conference at Rutgers University. And so a friend of mine had a van, so he was going to drive me out there. And he says, well, you going to take some books? Well, okay, I'll take a few and see what happens. He says, well, I got plenty of room. Why don't we take some cases of books? So I took like a number of cases. He says, because if you don't have them, you can't sell them, which is absolutely true. So we went out there, did a conference, and I sold over $700 worth of books. That was quite impressive. Then I went to another conference right after that in Saylorsburg, Pennsylvania, at an ashram of a great Mayavadi sannyasi, Swami Dayananda Saraswati. So I went there, and it was a good conference, and he appreciated some of the things I was doing and my writing. And I told him, he said, well, when you get back home, send an email out to all these people and we'll stay in touch. And I said, well, I'm not sure how I'm going to be able to do that because I just lost my computer because my apartment had been broken into. And he said, within that very minute, he looked around at everybody and he says, okay, we need to help Steve. How much money can we put together? And all the people that came together, I left that meeting with $2,700 in pledges to help me out, which came through. And he also organized someone to give me a computer. So I left with a computer to replace the one I had. And not only that, but he arranged his organization to send me a check every month. Now, even though I was staying in a temple house, I still had to pay rent. But that check that he sent me paid my rent every month. And so in some ways, I was thinking to myself, I am such a wimp. When something obstacle like that happens, when my apartment gets broken into, I lose my computer, I lose a bunch of other stuff, and I'm ready to quit. And Krishna has to make the arrangement to show me that regardless of all that, he's going to make sure I have whatever it takes to continue with my preaching work. So I had money. I sold $700 worth of books. I had a computer, and I had a monthly income for the next 5 years, actually, that paid my rent. So I'm thinking, like, how, if that's not a miracle, then I don't know what is. But it showed me that I was ready to give up. And Christian just arranged it that there's no excuse. There's no excuse to give up. And there's no reason to be hopeless. You simply have to become more determined. And I realized that. I remembered that from that point on. I got to become more determined. Don't be so ready to give up. Krishna will make whatever arrangements is necessary for you to continue. And so that was a great lesson. It was a great miracle. And it was something I never forgot. And it continued to motivate me forward to realize that if I'm doing something right, if Krishna wants me to do something, he'll make sure that I have all the facility I need to continue doing it. So that was a great lesson at that time. So anyway, that was one personal miracle which I consider a miracle, which happened to me.
Thank you, Prabhuji. There's one last question if you want to. This is Srimad Bhagavatam 5th canto. There is a discussion of the universe, the structure.
Wait,
and
say that again. I couldn't hear you.
Srimad Bhagavatam 5th canto, universe structure and modern cosmology differ. Why is it so? What is the truth?
The universe is structured how? What did you say?
And modern cosmology, how they differ.
Oh, basically, I'll tell you this. I'm not a person who can talk too much about the cosmography of the universe, because one thing I've realized by reading the 5th canto is that as you read it, it talks about different dimensions. And when I read it, I can say, okay, we're discussing this dimension here. And then as I go along, I suddenly realize that, oh my God, we're talking about a whole nother dimension now. And so I cannot always tell when there's that shift between talking about one particular dimension or level of reality, if you don't want to use the word dimension. We're talking about one level of reality, and now we're already shifting about another level of reality. So basically, I have never really gone into describing or discussing the Vedic cosmography, because it is and can be a little confusing. There's other people that I think can answer that better than I can. And because I've also have my limitations as to how to completely and clearly understand the Vedic description of the universe. So instead of trying to give you some speculative knowledge, I'll just tell you right off the bat that I'm probably not the best person to try to answer that kind of a question.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. These were all questions from different devotees. So we express our heartfelt gratitude to your grace for giving your wonderful association and then so many wonderful pastimes from your life and your interactions. I just want to mention a few points from your class, that how you told about your Krishna consciousness that started at 7 years, that morning that made you to feel that how there is a better reality than this material world, and how in 1970 a friend got a pamphlet and finally you got the Indian Bible Krishna, this Bhagavad Gita. And by reading that you ordered many more books, and when you got Krishna book, you was very happy as Krishna came back to your life. You told about this, how chanting and reading of Srila Prabhupada books has given you inner strength, and you decided to give up the bad habits like smoking. In 1975, you joined and Bhakti, and from there you went to have darshan of Srila Prabhupada. So, and you mentioned about your journey from getting first order from Amazon and took it to India for glorifying Vedic culture, and how someone called you the Vivekananda. By seeing you, he was reminding as Vivekananda, but you feel encouraged to continue to serve in this way. You told about your interactions with Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj, how he appreciated your contribution and encouraged you to continue to serve in this way. And your meeting at Ujjain in 2016 Kumbh Mela, and he told about that how Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj, he was not having guts, he was having guts to take the projects himself, like he took at Ujjain and Orlando, and rather just seeing the need rather than waiting for others to inspire, but he jumped himself to do the task. So, and he told about purity, that how we should chant nicely, associate with Srila Prabhupada book, pray for the favor of Guru and Parampara, just we should present and let Krishna decide how he's going to do. And you at last you mentioned about the miracle in your life, how Krishna arranged everything, just he has the desire to serve Krishna by writing books. So we beg for your blessings so that we can also continue our little services for the pleasure of Guru and Krishna in the mission of Srila Prabhupada throughout our life. And we're looking forward to have your association with Ujjain whenever this situation is settled this corona. So we can have more of less, we can have more of association. And we thank and we express our thanks by chanting one time Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Hare Krishna,
Krishna,
Krishna
Krishna,
Krishna,
Krishna, Hare Hare.
Hare Ram,
Hare Rama, Rama
Ram,
Rama, Hare
Hare.
Hare. Thank you very much, everybody. I hope that was inspiring and very nice to associate with you this way. And maybe we'll meet again sometime. Jai
Yes,
Shri Krishna.
Hare Krishna.